Hello everybody. So today we're going to go over how to make the cozy slipper socks on the loom, and the PDF will be linked in the description below. Okay, so the first thing you need is a loom with 24 pegs. You need your knitting tool, a yarn tensioner if you choose to use one. I prefer to. In the sample already done, goldenrod was used. Actually, I believe it's called golden, sorry. This one is Serenity, chunky yarn, and this one is called Forest. Now this is a number 5 weight. Okay, I did forget to mention that this pattern calls for 1 ball of the Serenity Chunky. I am a rather tight loom knitter, so if you are a loose loom knitter, or because this is self-striping yarn, you care that your stripes match up on both socks, then you might want to have 2. For me, it doesn't matter if the stripes match up because they're slipper socks, but to some it does. So the pattern was originally wrote for 1, and you can get 1 out of it if you are a rather tight loomer. I did not have very much left at the end. So to be on the safe side, you may want to have 2. First thing you want to do is mark your loom. I choose to use these little rubber bands that you can buy in the hair accessory aisle. And so the beginning of the pattern calls for a knit 2, purl 2 rib stitch. So what we're going to do is mark off our 2 pegs. Every other set of 2 we will mark, and that just helps you know which stitches you're going to knit or which stitches you're going to purl. And I just slide those right on there like that. And I just slide those right on there like that. You can get them, I got them at the Dollar Tree. I think it was like $750. All right, so let's just make sure. See, now that one, I always like to go back and make sure that I set it up right, because you want to be able to do this before you start your project, because it's not hard, but it's difficult once you get started. Okay, so the first thing I do is put the yarn into the tensioner. And you can use twine, anything kind of sturdy that you have. I just happen to have one of these little plastic pieces back from when the plastic keychains were big. I just happen to still have one laying around, so I keep it in my loom kit now. So you just thread it through your tensioner until it comes up the top, and then what you do is just put your yarn through the loop at the bottom and pull it on through. And what the tensioner does is just keeps your yarn tension the same throughout your project, because you don't want a loose piece here or a loose piece there. Now to do the cast on, I'm going to be doing the chain cast on. And with the chain cast on, you want to cast on in the opposite direction that you are comfortable working in. So for me, it's easier to do purls clockwise. So I will be casting on counterclockwise. So what you do you make your slip knot. Okay, so you have your loop and you put it around your first peg. So for me, this will be, the marked peg will actually be the last peg. And once we get started, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the first one's a little awkward, and it is a little awkward at this angle, but I'm trying to give you the best. So you have your loop here behind your peg, and what you want to do, make it big enough, draw that working yarn through the loop. And like I said, the first one is a little more difficult just because you have that knot you want to hold on to. You don't want it to pull through. And you can always tighten it up when you get to the next one. Okay, so you just grab your tail here from behind and your knot, and you just kind of tighten it up. So then from there, you go around, you take your loop, and you go around the second peg and pull it through. See, that one was a little tighter. So now I can actually tighten this one down, and then you can let it go. And then you do the same thing all the way around. Put the loop behind, pull it through. Loop behind, and pull it through. One more time, I'll show you. Put the loop behind and pull it through. So when you get all the way back around, I will show you what to do with the last loop. Okay, so we're just about at the end. We got a few more to do. Now, if you were working in a flat panel, you would stop right there and you would just pop the loop on and treat both of those as one stitch. But because we're working in the round, we are just going to pop that over there onto that last stitch so that way it's connected. Now, the reason why I like the chain stitch, I don't know if you can see that, the way that it looks like a chain on the inside of the loom. That's the way that your cast on is going to look, and it gives it a tighter, more of a cleaner look. Okay, so now we'll get started. Like I said, the PDF link is in the description. If you have not had a chance to download the PDF, you might want to do that right quick just so you can follow along. Okay, so in the beginning, I told you the reason why I cast it on counterclockwise is because I like to work clockwise. So you always want to go in the direction that the yarn is going. So by casting on this way and popping that last loop on that peg, it makes the yarn, working yarn, go in this direction, which for me, I am more comfortable doing purls this way. Most right-handers do work this way, and left-handers work this way, but whatever way is comfortable for you. So now, the pattern calls for the flat knit to purl to rib stitch for 2 inches. So that's what we're going to start doing. So to do your flat knit, you put your yarn, working yarn, in front of the peg. You lift your bottom loop over. Now, if you marked the stitches that you marked, if you prefer to mark purl stitches, you can do the opposite here and do purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2. Whichever's more comfortable for you as far as your marked stitches. So there's your knit 2. Now to purl, you bring your working yarn below your stitch, put your loom tool through the loop that is on the peg, draw up your working yarn, flip that old loop off, and your new loop on. And it is a lot easier to do this when you're not holding your loom up, but I want you guys to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. So there's your purl 2, your knit 2, purl 2, and once you, okay, old loop off, new loop on. Working yarn underneath, old loop off, new loop on. And once you get a little bit more comfortable with loom knitting, you'll be able to do this without even letting go of the working yarn. You can just let the tool do the work for you. But sometimes you do drop a stitch, like I just did. So there, we are back to our knit 2. And our purl 2. Again, working yarn underneath, pull your loop up, old loop off, new loop on. Working yarn underneath, pull the loop up, old loop off, new loop on. This is the flat knit stitch, just because the yarn is flat across. There are other knit stitches that can be used. I wrote this pattern to use the flat knit because it is a tighter knit. At least for the ribbing part. Now I will be showing you how to do the E-wrap later in the video, but I'll also show you how to do the garter stitch, where you can, that's one row of E-wrap and one row of purl, but I'm going to show you how to work both rounds at the same time. So that was a purl. And we have our 2 knits. Okay, we're back here at the end. We do our purl, and our last stitch here, we're just going to treat all these loops that are on there as one. Sometimes it's a little harder to do that first with all the extra loops. And there you go. So like I said, for me, because I work clockwise, I know that my marked peg is my last peg in the round. Okay, so continue doing that knit 2, purl 2 all the way around the loom until your project measures 2 inches, and we will be back. Okay, so now you should be at the point where you have 2 inches of your knit 2, purl 2 rib stitch completed. And the way I measure that is I just take the tape measure, I put it up by the actual peg, and I measure it, and it comes to 2 inches. Now keep in mind that once this is off the loom and it has time to relax, it will be just a little bit longer than the 2 inches. So at this point, we are going to start on the garter stitch part of the tube sock. Now the pattern says to use this stitch until piece measures 11 inches. This part of the pattern can be customized. So basically what you're doing is the garter stitch will go all the way to where the toes start. So if you want a longer sock, you can do more than the total piece measuring 11 inches. If you want it shorter, you can do less than that. In that 11-inch measurement, I am counting the rib stitch, okay? So this is where your tensioner comes in handy. So to do the garter stitch, we're going to use the E-wrap. So basically what you do is you take your yarn behind the peg, bring it around the front and to the back again. And see, that makes like a little cursive E. And you just do that all the way around your loom. Again, like I said, this is an awkward position, so it's kind of hard to do it fast like I normally would. But what the also what the tensioner does is it keeps your yarn at the same tension, so you don't have loose spots or tight spots in your yarn. So continue all the way around to your your marked peg, and we'll show you what to do next. Okay, so you continue wrapping it all the way around, and when you get to your last peg, you just wrap it around and bring it to the front. So your loom should be wrapped something like that, okay? Now this is the hack part of the garter stitch. So you have your knit row, which will be your E-wrap, but we're also going to purl at the same time. So the way we're going to do that is we go to our first peg, we take our loop over, and then we're going to purl that same peg. So essentially what we're doing is 2 rounds at the same time. Knit, same peg, we're going to purl. Knit, and purl. And we're going to continue to do that. Okay, so at this point you should be back to your first peg. So to continue the garter stitch, we are going to do another round of our E-wrap. So you just wrap all your pegs all the way around the loom. Till you get back to your marked peg. And then I just, like I said, pull the yarn down here to the front. Flip off the E-knit stitch. And purl the next stitch. So you're just going to continue to do the E-wrap and purl, which is your garter stitch, until your piece is 11 inches or whatever measurement you decided. When we get done with that, we'll learn how to do the toe and the cast off. Okay, so at this point, your piece should measure 11 inches. And now we're going to start working on the toe. So for this part, we are going to do just the flat knit stitch. Yarn in front, pull loop over. Yarn in front, pull loop over. Yarn in front, pull loop over. And this is just a little bit of a tighter stitch for the toe area. We will continue doing this stitch in the round until the toe area measures 2 inches. Okay, so now that you have knit your toe area for 2 inches, the last part of the pattern calls for 1 row of E-wrap, and then we will start the cast off. So we're going to do 1 row of E-wrap, then we're going to do 1 row of the flat knit. And when you get to that flat knit stitch, do those very loosely because we're going to be moving stitches from pegs to continue with the cast off. Okay, so at this point you've done your 1 row of E-wrap and 1 row of the flat knit loosely. And we are going to start with the actual cast off. Now, if you remember, because of the way I did my cast on, this is actually my ending peg and not my starting peg. So this is actually peg 1. So what we're going to do is move peg 4 to peg 3. And this is where it comes in that you need to do that last row of knitting as loosely as possible, because sometimes it's hard to maneuver these stitches. So I took the loop off of peg 4 and I'm going to place it onto peg 3. We're going to move 8 to 7. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then 12 to 11. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. (16 to 15), 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 20 to 19, so 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And sometimes it is a little hard to get that on there. And then finally 24, which is my last peg, to 23. That one is a little easier. So at this point, you should have 3 pegs with a stitch, 1 without, 3 with, 1 without, all the way around. And now we're going to flat knit. And again, you want to try to make this as loose as you can because you will be moving pegs again in the next round. So you just knit off like you normally do your flat knit stitch. Then when you get to a peg that has 2, you just treat it as 1 stitch. You flip both of those off. Sometimes you'll have to do them one at a time, but that's okay. Now when you get to an empty peg, you just put your working yarn behind it and continue to knit those off, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so now that you have knit those, we're going to start moving some more pegs. we are going to move number 2 to number 1. And don't worry, this is in the PDF and I will link it in the bottom. We're going to move number 6 to number 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's basically going to be your stitch in the middle that you're going to be moving. The stitch in the middle of your 3 stitch sequence. So then we're going to move number 10 to number 9. Number 14 to number 13. 18 to 17. And finally 22 to 21. So now what you're left with is 1 stitch on every other peg. Okay? Knit those the same way you did in the previous round, making sure that your working yarn is behind a peg that does not have a stitch on it, and treating both of those stitches as one. Okay, at this point you have knit all the way around. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your working yarn and you're going to wrap it around the loom 2 times. Take your scissors and cut your yarn. Just throw that back off to the side. Okay. So now you're going to take your looming tool, and what you're going to do is just draw the working yarn through the loop, almost like you would do when you were purling. Sorry for the noise in the background. That was my dog that just sneezed. So once you pull your working yarn through that loop, just pop the loop right off the peg. And we're going to do that for every other peg. Pull the working yarn through. Pop the loop off. Skip a peg to the next one. And you can cut your yarn shorter. I just prefer to have more than enough. Again, we're going to skip this peg and we're going to the next one. We're going to pull the working yarn through and pop that off. And what you're going to see at the top is it's starting to create like this star pattern. Skip this peg, go to the next one. We're just going to continue to do that all the way around. So we get back to our starting point. And when we get back to the starting point, we will just go back and work the ones that are still left on the pegs in the same manner. So working yarn through the loop, pull it off. Some people call this the drawstring cast on. I've seen it referred to as a flat drawstring cast, or not, excuse me, not cast on, but cast off. So this just makes an easy cast off for your toe. Okay, you got that one stitch left over here. pull it through, working yarn through, pop it off, and you're done. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. At this point, I turn it inside out. Find your working yarn end from in the middle, pull it out, and you just kind of pull it tight. What that does is it closes the toe up. Now at this point, what I do is I look to see if there's any little areas in the toe that may need some extra yarn. I weave the working yarn in, clip it off, and voila, you have your sock. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel so you will be up to date on future projects. Thanks again, guys.